Oh, I can share my screen. Great. All right, so welcome everyone, and thank you for coming today. This is Filecoin Core Devs number 48. Today is Thursday, August 4th in most parts of the world. And as you all know, today we are piloting a new meeting format. So we'll touch on this in just a second, but the focus is really to shift away from sort of standard and ecosystem updates about technical work into more engineering-driven discussion about some of the FIPS and technical changes that are being pursued by various teams in the Filecoin ecosystem. So today the plan is to walk through some of those changes in a little bit more detail and give you some space to ask questions or provide additional suggestions for how we can make this meeting valuable to you. And then we're going to go through 3 separate discussions. The first is going to be on standard message authentication method for actors. We'll then touch on signature domain separation. Both of these are FIPS, which are currently being considered. And last up, we will discuss the pending V17 network upgrade, which, as you may or may not be aware of, has lots of things planned for it, but which we're still working on nailing down exact specifics. All right, so again, we've changed the meeting. This is after a lot of feedback from various stakeholders. And again, we really wanted to just make this meeting more value aligned, right? You have a lot of meetings, you may be getting up at really weird hours of the day, and we want to make sure that the conversations that are happening here really help move things forward within our ecosystem at a pretty fundamental level. So we have fewer meetings, they're now once a month, but we're asking everyone to join a single meeting time, which will alternate, just to make sure that we get as many people on the call as possible. Again, we're moving away from sharing sort of rote updates. At the end of all of the slides, I'll add an appendix where you can find all of the implementation team roadmaps. You can quickly check network statistics if you want to know how much data is currently on the network, et cetera. We want to eschew all of those in favor of actually hosting technical discussions while we're all present, so that we can actually really benefit from getting everyone's input on a diversity of things. And last, something we don't currently do much of yet, but as the ecosystem grows, the community grows, things become a little bit more complicated. We want to make sure that the core devs is a robust group that can eventually help us make more governance decisions as well. So right now, the only thing core devs are ever really asked to do when it comes to governing the network is to potentially approve FRCs. This in addition to weighing in on technical deliberations. But in the future, it could be that we want core devs to help navigate through sort of community contentious FIPS or other proposals. If there's ever a need for an emergency upgrade, et cetera, it's core devs who should be able to weigh in and provide guidance and decision-making. And for right now, we just want to make sure that we have a robust enough group so that if the time ever comes, we know exactly who we're calling upon. So right now, the list of things that core devs are asked to do are to propose discussion topics. We ask that you join the Phil Core Devs channel on Slack. We ask that you attend meetings, and we ask that you participate in decision-making. So not everything we discuss here is going to fall in your wheelhouse of specialty. That's totally fine. And for right now, we're going to keep attendance, but there are no attendance requirements. We know everyone is busy and in different parts of the world. But the ask is, again, that we have sort of a solid group and we know more or less who is in it. This is one of the few meetings in the Filecoin ecosystem that is not just generally open to anybody who would like to attend. And so we ask that if you do attend, you think of it as a privilege. And in kind, also, I think the broader community appreciates the time that you spend here with all of us. So any questions about these expectations or the meeting format, requests, et cetera? All right, pretty straightforward. No big changes here. All right, if you think of anything, you can just throw it in Phil Core Devs, keep it open for everyone to see. And if there's nothing else, then Ayush, it's over to you.
Thanks, Caitlin. I'm excited about the new meeting format. I think this will be more productive all around and hopefully get more people. I want to talk about standard method authentication for actors. I will start off by saying I'm kind of presenting Alex North's work, which is in turn based on the work of the authors of EIP 1271. Yeah, so I'm excited to kick off this conversation. This is something I would like to include in NV17, although that's a topic for the third item in our agenda today. The nice thing about this proposal is that conceptually the change we're talking about is very, very small and very, very simple to understand, or at least the concrete change that we're proposing making in the immediate network upgrade. The motivation, so this is more of a, the interesting part of the discussion is more around kind of future work and general extensibility. In one line, the proposal is to allow for actors to authenticate or authorize, the terminology needs to be fleshed out, to authorize that they approve of some piece of data, some message, but not, we don't mean message in the terms of the message in the Filecoin protocol, some piece of data. As a concrete example, in the Filecoin network today, account actors, so SecP and BLS addresses, can serve as storage clients and a part of that functionality is that they sign a deal proposal that essentially authorizing that they are interested in making a deal for this particular PCID, for particular storage price, and so on. When it is time for actors code, in this case the storage market actor, to verify that this account actor is in fact authorizing this deal proposal, they simply perform a signature validation. So they're provided the actual deal proposal, a signature, let's say a SecP signature of the deal proposal, they validate that, and that's your proof that this account actor approves of this deal proposal idea. And that's great, that works, but that does mean that only account actors can serve as storage clients. Concretely today, a multi-sig actors are a type of actor that could function as storage clients if they wanted to. There's no conceptual reason why they shouldn't be able to, but they cannot, because the storage market actor functions by validating a single signature. So that's something that we want to change, in particular with an eye to the FVM, and this is what led to FIP35, which kind of re-architects the system a little bit in order to be able to allow arbitrary actors to function as storage clients. And the way it does that is by adding 3 new methods that requires the storage client actor to kind of initiate something that then lives on chain, that then gets approved later on by a storage provider, and a complicated handshake. A much simpler, much more generic, and therefore much more flexible approach is to allow actors to basically adopt a standard. We're not doing anything technically genius here, but to adopt some standard for how actors can authorize these pieces of data. Concretely, what this FIP proposes, and I opened the draft draft PR is now open. Concretely, what this FIP proposes is simply to add some authorize data method to actors, and any actor that is interested in being able to provide this functionality can implement that method. The FIP itself currently only proposes adding that method to the account actor right now, and as you can imagine, this is a very simple method because the account actor simply has to perform a signature validation. The other change will be for the storage market actor to start invoking this method instead of just assuming a signature validation is the correct way to authorize a message. So that's the concrete proposal that's being made. The idea would be that, with this model, if we wanted multi-sig actors to function as storage clients, that would be relatively simple to do. They could implement this authorized message method by validating a series of signatures. But the real driving impetus here is that user-defined actors that could have arbitrary authentication logic can implement this method as they see fit. And so long as they implement this method, other actors will be able to approve or verify that they approve of certain pieces of data. If you're wondering how that could happen, that ties to the discussion around having some new dispatch mechanism that's not method number based. So we could have, and that is an open discussion that's ongoing. It could be method number based, but then we'd be privileging some method number as the authenticate method, and that's probably not what we want to do. So that's my spiel. Concrete proposal for NV17 is a few lines of code changing in the account and market actor. It's a single new method. I assume that's relatively uncontroversial. But what I am interested in is whether people agree that this will serve its purpose, and yeah, whether there's a better way to do it, whether we're overlooking anything. Sorry, last thing I'll say is that there is some overlap, or I will flag this in the FIP discussion. There is some overlap between this discussion and the broader conversation around account abstractions, which allow for any actors to serve as top-level message senders. But I think that overlap is relatively minimal. But if you're thinking that this sounds vaguely similar to that, it does, but they're serving fairly different purposes. So yeah, that's my spiel. I'm happy to hear what people think.
I have no questions. That was a great description of the change. But I just want to make it clear. I proposed FIP35, which is the complicated way of getting actors to be deal clients. And I would, we'll withdraw FIP35 if we do this instead. I think this is a far better way to do it.
Deb, do you have a question?
Yeah, or comment. I think it's two comments. One, it would be nice to, I guess, quote unquote, IPLDIs this a little bit. For example, like I would really like to be able to send an IPLD DAG as the message, at least from actor to actor. Yeah, or at least to have this data be a bit typed, because, like, for example, my authorization might want to be some complicated data structure instead of just some arbitrary array of bytes. There's just one small comment. Another comment is once we do get the FEM M2.2, we could add the ability to create special types of objects that can only be created by specific actors, and that could be used to short circuit the authorization calls. Instead of having to say, like, hey, did this actor authorize this thing, you would be able to ask the system, hey, is this thing correctly, like, authorized by this actor? I don't think that precludes this proposal, because this proposal would allow you to create authorizations off chain as well. But I just wanted to note that.
Yeah, thanks. Regarding the first suggestion, I'm not sure I fully follow. Can that typing not just be enforced from actor to actor as appropriate instead of enforcing it?
So the problem is, like, if I just send you a message and say, here's the authorization string or string of bytes, and here's the authorization message, you don't really necessarily know what that is. The other problem is, like, if the message references, so okay, from off chain it can't reference a DAG, but from on chain, let me think of how this would work. Like, let's say that, like, I create some authorization object that references something I store in some local tree on chain. I then give you that authorization object. Then you pass it around. Someone gives it back to me, and I want to validate, like, is this in my quote unquote authorization registry or not? Like, in this world, I'm actually the world where I can pass around entire subtags. So, for example, the message might want to be a reference to some entire subtag. The problem with the current solution is that if it's just bytes, then I can't turn that into a CID just because of how our system works. Does this make sense?
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying.
As you describe it, it doesn't quite make sense to me. Obviously, some bytes can be interpreted as a CID. I think you're referring to it not like a future property of the system, which is that the actor that receives that CID encoded as bytes won't be able to load that block from the block store.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, not quite well defined enough for us yet to really concretely design around. But I would expect that in most cases that this message passed by this message that is authenticated is in fact a hash, and that the receiving actor, I mean, if it's not cryptographically signed, it is in fact a hash or some key into some data structure, and the authenticating actor will just look it up in a table locally. I don't think that's going to be a problem if it's it's not going to be the root of a hand. It's going to be a key in a hand or something like that.
Yes. Okay. So I should give you a little more context here. I'm trying to think forward towards things like potential like state garbage collection and state rent and stuff like that. And in that world, it'd be really nice if the data, like basically like the authorization table were really, really, really tiny. And it basically just included keys and like the hashes of the values. So allow you to validate that an object was authorized, but it didn't store the associated data. In that world, it'd be really nice if I could have these sort of like envelopes. Actually, sorry, no. No, it's fine. Never mind. This is not a problem because like the message itself can still be like a bytes representation of the CID as long as like yeah, this is fine because basically like what I can do locally is I can store both like the real CID of my state and this verification thing. This verification thing is basically just a signature and an identifier on the signature, and then I can just send that to the actor. The actor can validate it, but they don't actually need the underlying data, so everything should be fine. Sorry, withdraw that.
Yeah, it depends. That the other actor might need the underlying data, but they'll have to receive that separately if there's a way to send a handle or something.
Yeah. The important thing is that the party that keeps these authorization parameters, that keeps like the signed object, gets those sort of like hold on to the reference to the data, but that's fine. They can do that anyways.
Yep, good.
Any other questions, feedback, or comments for Ayush? All right. And I did see yesterday, Alex, I saw your note about potentially retracting FIP 35. I did remove it from the list of FIPs that we'll consider for V17 so far. I think if you want to do that in favor of this proposal, makes total sense. And as long as there are like no outstanding technical concerns, I think we can just plan for it to be considered either revoked, removed, superseded, whatever language you want to use, and we can just go forward with this.
If FIP 35 hasn't actually been approved, yeah, I mean, it just stays in draft status or whatever the label is, right?
Yeah, we've in the past, I think we've used superseded even if it hadn't been implemented into the network, but this FIP hasn't been approved. It's a draft.
I'm wondering if like the author is willing to withdraw it. Should we introduce a withdrawn status just for the clarity of the FIP?
Yeah, easy to do.
Sounds good. I do have a PRO for that already, but I think the author should be the one approve it.
Sounds good. All right, so before we jump into V17 planning, then we will throw it over to Jeff to talk about signature domain separation.
All right. Hey, everybody. There's a bunch of people in this call I haven't met yet. I joined the Lotus team in April, and I'm going to be presenting a FIP on signature domain separation. So right now, all signed data on the network is our CBOR encoded byte arrays. So if I want to send a message on the network, it gets serialized into a byte array with CBOR, and then we sign those bytes, and that's how we verify data when it lands on chain. But we have a bit of a problem with this because if I'm just signing an array of bytes, that could potentially be deserialized into any data type. So theoretically, I could sign a message, send that on chain, and someone else could take that message, deserialize those bytes into a block header, and maybe it deserializes into an invalid block header, and then that block header could be submitted to the chain, and I could get slashed for signing this message. This isn't actually a problem right now, luckily, because of the way CBOR encoding works. So kind of by chance right now, the metadata that occurs at the beginning of our CBOR encodings is different for all the types of data that we send on chain. So this isn't a problem yet. But with the FVM coming out and us wanting to have smart contracts, users are going to want to be able to sign arbitrary data to send on chain. Maybe I want to send a message to do something with my CryptoKitty, and maybe that message could be decoded into an invalid block header and cause issues. So what we're proposing to do is to put a fixed length tag in front of any data, that byte array, before we sign it, where the tag is different for, is unique to the type of data that's being signed. So examples of the types of data that we have right now: messages, block headers, deal proposals, storage asks. And the proposal right now is to have one tag for user generated data. So we can tell that the data that was signed was user generated data. So the tag would be prepended to the bytes that you're signing, but we wouldn't actually have to send that data along. So we just send the original bytes with the signature, and then when the data is received on the other end, they can infer what the tag was, or what the tag should be, based on the type of data they're trying to deserialize into, and then verify the signature based on that. So the proposal is to kind of do this in 2 steps. The first one would be to implement, to make all signatures on the network use these tags, but signature verification would still accept messages without the tag, because we're going to need, so some messages might kind of would have been signed before the upgrade. And we still want those to be valid, and we're probably going to need some time to get any third-party wallets on board to use the new signature scheme. So there's a couple kind of open questions that I have with this. One is, what do we want the length of the tag to be? It could be as short as 1 byte. We can make it longer to kind of make it a little more extensible in the future. Another question I have is what we should do with payment channel vouchers. Payment channel vouchers are kind of designed to live off chain for an extended period of time. And if we wanted to enforce the domain separation tags on the payment channel vouchers, we might have to invalidate older vouchers, which we might not want to do. And then the last open question is if we can make this work with BLS aggregation. So right now in blocks, if there's messages signed with BLS accounts, we kind of aggregate all those signatures together, and in the interim period where we want to accept messages both with and without tags, I don't know of a good way to verify those aggregated BLS signatures. So yeah, and then in a future upgrade so maybe one upgrade after, but in some future upgrade, we would then we would enforce that all tags would be required on messages or data set on the network.
Cool. I'll go first. Thanks for the presentation. It's nice to have this conversation. I'm very undecided about what the outcome will be, and I'm curious to see where we go. But I'm glad this is being surfaced. I'd like to start by talking about the motivation a little bit, because I'm still not really clear how much we need this. From an aesthetic sense, it feels like something we should strictly have for the kind of layer 1 items that we sign, blocks, messages, that examples that you gave. Regarding whether the FVM changes things, I'm a little less sure, because at the end of the day, well, depending on how we enforce this, it feels like it'll always be possible for some malicious contract deployer or malicious entity in the system to try and trick a user into shooting themselves in the foot. I don't think we can achieve perfection there. So it is a matter of putting up as many barriers as possible, potentially. We don't have perfection today. I'm sure you could trick some user somewhere into signing some bytes that they didn't realize was a message that gave away all their Filecoin or so on. And I'm sure that will continue to be a possibility. I think I agree and would like the idea of enforcing this for the L1 items. That feels like that just feels like an oversight to me. We should have had it. We're kind of lucky. We just got lucky that we don't have the problem today. And yeah, some of the open questions, in particular around the BLS aggregation one, are a little painful. Potentially, product considerations will be a little tricky here with our third-party wallets, but it seems achievable. It seems well contained, and I'd like to get it done. Is my current thought. What to do with contracts with data that with signature validations that contracts potentially require, I'm a lot less certain about. I don't know whether we'll tag all user space data with some user tag idea works. It might just be another like improvement towards preventing exploits, but I don't know if it's actually effective, and it potentially could be painful because it does mean that now if you're signing data that's going to be consumed by or going to be validated on chain by some arbitrary actor, you now have to follow this tag, which is kind of a weird requirement to have, and potentially complicates things like bridging with other chains or so on. So yeah, that's my thought dump.
Yeah, so I think kind of the only thing I want to respond to there is the user space stuff. And so obviously like users can still kind of shoot themselves in the foot if they work hard enough. But I think what we want to do is provide like the main code path for user generated data to be signed to have that tag so it cannot be used maliciously. And like contracts can choose how to validate things however they want. And I think like I don't know a whole lot about cross-chain communication, but you know, if something needs to be sent and we can just kind of unwrap that tag and send whatever data they want along, like yeah, anyway.
So for cross-chain stuff, we will still need to preserve the ability to just validate an arbitrary signature that like tag or no. But the point of the tag really is to make it so it's easy to reason about the system. Or like right now, even without attacks, like there may still in theory be some way to like take one type of message and reuse it somewhere else. Like we've reasoned about a lot of this. We don't think there is, but tags just make us don't think about it. You have them and you're done. One cool thing we can do though is like if we say a tag can be an arbitrary string, or maybe a tag can be like the hash of an arbitrary string, we can actually use this in the UI where we can literally like say like we can put the help text that says what your thing means, and then hash that and use that hash as the tag, because that's not going to be when the message is being arbitrary size. And then the user can read this and say, hey, yes, do I want to sign a message that is going to be used with this wallet or whatever, and make that decision. So that's one of the nice things. Another thing I want to point out is that we don't like enforcing doesn't really matter. Enforcing is more client side than server side, or than actor side, because once the user signs something, like the user has signed it. If like the server enters something that's not tagged, it's like, I guess there are reasons for like to try to be careful here, because okay, like what if they signed something that had nothing to do with Filecoin, use that in a different system? But still, like I think we can kind of punt that out into the distant future and maybe just not do it if need be, where we can say, look, like if you start reusing your key that you're using in Filecoin to sign things that are not related to Filecoin, like that's a problem we can't really help.
So one question, I think I broadly agree with you, Streb. One question I'd like to ask you or anyone else is, Do we believe that the necessity of having this, at least for the core L1 stuff, increases with the advent of the FEM?
Yes. So like before the FVM, we could reason about all the different things that were being signed on the Filecoin network. With the FVM, we can't reason about that. So we need some way for people to kind of like distinguish their data from my data, such that like we have these separate systems. Does that make sense?
Yes. But
So like right now, when I create a new sign thing, I can say, here's the universe of things that are signed. Can my new sign data be interpreted as any of those, or can any of those be interpreted as my sign data? With the advent of the FDM, everyone is signing random things. This becomes much more difficult.
Then follow-up question. Does this proposal actually help if we exclude the user tag bit?
What do you mean we exclude the user tag?
So if we break this proposal up into two halves, introducing the tags for core L1 validations and also adding a tag that says this is some user space data that is being signed and validated on chain. If we don't have that second piece, are we actually gaining anything?
Yes, I actually don't think we need to have any piece that says this is user space or not user space. We just need something that says what it is. Ideally, this should all be flat. There's no reason to have a hierarchy here, really, at least in my opinion.
But what if malicious contract deployer intentionally creates data that looks like a message that sends away all your Filecoin?
That's their problem. But it's okay. So like this could be a tooling thing. You're right. The point is your local Filecoin client or MetaMask wallet or whatever needs to display the tag to the user and say, hey, user, are you sure you want to sign this thing? Now, having a separate section where it's like fill underscore something as like the user space or as like not user space, like basically having reserved prefixes in this concept would help here a bit because it would allow tooling to say, this is using this reserved thing, not good. I see where that comes from. I wouldn't necessarily say like a system versus user space tag. I'd say it's more it's like subsystem tag where like you can reserve some kind of name somewhere. For example, we have this table called the multi-codec table, where you could literally say like, hey, like this codec is reserved, and if you use a tag that starts with this codec, then like you must be associated with the system, and then like tooling may or may not decide to enforce this. But that's, I guess it's an option. It does add some security. Is this making sense?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I feel like with a flat table, you could also just like reserve a range and get more or less the same thing.
Well, so the nice thing about hierarchical is that it allows you to create more and more tags yourself for your own stuff. So like once you assign like the outer scope, then like the contract author or the system or whatever can just keep on like adding subscopes for different things without having to go back and reserve anything else. It also means that like all you have to do is get your one outer scopes or integrate the tooling. Tooling now understands that, and it can highlight in the UI, hey, this is a quote unquote official Filecoin message, or hey, this is related to the Glyph wallet, and then here's the subtag.
Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate this proposal getting more detail. I think it probably needs yet more detail in order to evaluate how much different bits of it actually work and then what protection they potentially offer. I think the things Stephen's talking about make sense to me, but I do think we need an extra level of detail here. I'm a bit skeptical on the whole user. There's anything we can do at the system level for sort of user space data. I don't think there's anything we can enforce without limiting the system. So maybe it's more of a API SDK thing to encourage other applications use their own tags. And maybe we can have some kind of recommendation for the structure of those tags and so on. That could be great. But there's some really concrete things we can talk about, what we can do for the L1 data types. I think those are really worth pursuing. But I think we need we need a little bit more detail about exactly how that's going to work to evaluate. I think some of the cases might not work. Payment channel vouchers you've already touched on. I think it's going to be very difficult for us to do anything to the built-in payment channel actor. I don't think it's reasonable for us to invalidate any vouchers. My general hope for the payment channel is that someone writes an even better payment channel in the future once the FVM allows them to deploy such things, and that one can use domain separation tags. Similar for the deal proposals. I don't think there's anything we can really do to invalidate an existing deal proposal. But my hope is that other marketplaces come along with better ideas here and make it sort of a problem that goes out of the core devs scope. Nevertheless, this is great direction. I'm certainly behind the reason for this. I think it needs more concrete detail about actually how each of these things are going to work. And then we can evaluate which ones of them are attractive.
I think it's important to note that we don't have to invalidate the previous deals. We can simply add. So if we allow domain separation tags, that means the user can basically opt into or can upgrade into better security where their data can no longer be used in other places. It does mean that if they're still signing data that does not have a tag, then okay, that could be confused with other things. But once the user only starts signing things that use tags, then they then they gain that security, even if the contracts themselves don't require the tags. They basically say, well, I'll check with both the tag and without the tag and see which one works.
Right. Yeah, sure. I guess I'm saying I don't think the contract can ever require the tag.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. As long as we, if every code path where a user is signing data has a tag, then yeah, then we don't really need to enforce the tags. It's a good idea. Thanks.
Yeah, and can totally become something that clients can choose. A higher security client can choose to only, I guess not if it's protocol level, never mind.
Any final questions, comments, etc. for Jeff?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to get a little bit more detail on what we're saying next steps are. Like with the first one, I feel like it was pretty clear. So with this, a little bit more motivation and maybe do you think a spec would be useful here of like exactly what this would look like and maybe some initial prototyping is a good next step.
I also think this proposal was originally included as one of the ones that we were considering for the next network upgrade. It sounds like that's probably not the case, just because of timing requirements and outstanding work needs. But if Jeff, if you or anyone else disagrees, then we can discuss that in just a second. All right. So moving on then to the final discussion. This is the one on the pending network upgrade. Very difficult to nail down, lots of moving pieces this go around, which is great. It makes it exciting. Also, one apology, I was out earlier this week due to a wedding. So there was a lot of conversation about various FIPS yesterday in Slack and on GitHub. So if you see something here that strikes you as incorrect based on a conversation you had yesterday, please let me know because I have not been able to catch up on all of those yet. But what we have are two lists, and I will describe why they're done this way in a second. Confirmed FIPS are ones that are technically desirable for this upgrade sequence. They expand usability and or are necessary for pending FVM updates during later network upgrades. These are ones which may not all be accepted. Some of them do not yet have FIP drafts. But pending, the community acceptance and last call processes, these are the ones which there seems to be the most traction around including in the next network upgrade. And again, can make changes. It sounds like signature domain separation may not be included. But for the most part, some of these we've been discussing for weeks now. FIP 29 and FIP 34 have already been accepted. And so from my perspective, it seems like implementation teams are welcome to begin sort of designing specs, asking questions, and really sort of piloting what these would look like for future releases. The big exception here is this potential FIPS category. This is for FIP 36, which I think many of us are familiar with the extensive conversation that's happened around this. I think one of the things that's important with this FIP is that there are a lot of sort of community sensitivities around how the sort of FIP process is managed here. But it's important to remember that there is technically a distinction between how we do technical planning for upgrades and how we actually make governance decisions. We don't often sort of observe that distance, but I think in this case we ought to, where we can plan for a certain scope for the network upgrade independent of this FIPS sort of acceptance status. If it is able to reach a place where it is accepted in time to be considered, we've discussed previously that it's a pretty lightweight code change. But I think for certainty, especially for Lotus, Venus, and Forest, we should move forward confirming FIPS, which we know ought to be included, working on those last call processes and getting drafts finalized, and FIP 36 can of course sort of be managed separately as it has been so far. So the specific questions or feedback that would be most valuable here is, looking at this list on the left side, is there anything that you think ought not to be included or which has been omitted, which shouldn't be? Do you have, I see Alex raise his hand, if you have specific updates on some of the drafts you're working on, that's very helpful as well. Or if there are concerns or other questions about FIP 36, we can discuss those as well. Alex?
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate. I sent you some updates late, yesterday, and you probably haven't had time to integrate them all yet. So that sort of sense. Let me describe what let me just describe a delta from this slide from what I would propose as the scope for 17. Thanks for moving FIP 35. We need to add in its place the standard authentication mechanism proposal that Ayush presented just earlier. That's net less work, so all of the justifications for FIP 35 I think carry over to that proposal, and it's net less work even though it's a newer proposal. Then I think that's it for confirmed FIPS. Oh, and then remove new API. I would propose removing new API for built-in actors from the confirmed FIPS here. I would probably just bump it to potential. There's still potential for us to do it, but it depends basically on a negotiation or figuring out with the FEM team about their projected timelines. Ultimately, it's needed for the FEM M2, but it could land simultaneous with that. It's unlikely to have any change, any unexpected side effects because it's just adding new APIs that are specifically to be called by user actors. And so we can defer it, and it would benefit somewhat from some time to thoughtfully design what that API is going to be. So it depends. It depends a little bit on figuring out with Raoul how much we want to constrain scope here in the name of timeline, or expand scope in the name of providing an even better platform. But that new API I don't think is necessary for V17, and so we haven't designed it yet, of course. So it's probably a bit early to say it's confirmed as desirable. And then I would like to just, and then in the potential FIPS, like there's a great category to have. I think there is some, a little bit of uncertainty about the scope yet, which I hope will nail down in discussion with the FEM team. And again, I'm only talking about like technical desirable scope here. I realize the governance process still needs to roll to confirm that. If we were to expand scope, there is some opportunity to add the final step of refactoring for user programmable storage markets. This is a thing that Jen in particular and the Lotus team were very keen to try to put in scope. I have redone the design for it on top of the fill plus decoupling, and it looks like a relatively modest change, less total work than the fill plus decoupling. And so it would bring us the final step towards a user programmer creating something that can function as a storage market, either in the FEVM with appropriate bridging or in the native FEM when that becomes possible. There'd be some advantage to getting that all done at once so it's immediately usable. Otherwise, it's likely that that'll get bumped out 2 network upgrades or so into the future before someone can write a contract that functions as a bounty or as a replication contract or something like that. But it would certainly expand the scope. It would expand the timeline for Network 17. And so it's still a stretch to me to include that. And again, I would want to talk more with the FEM team about their plans. I wouldn't want to delay. I wouldn't want to push back the launch of user programmability in order to get that. But if we have the time anyway, based on the complexity that the FEM team needs to deal with, then we could consider it. One final step, one final thing, attached to the FIP36, there's an open discussion at the moment about PORIP security policy. This is primarily a discussion about governance and like a prospective discussion about what would we do if, in the unlikely but unfortunate case that we discover some weakness in PORIP, how would we respond in the network? Myself and the Cryptonet team think it's relatively important that we have this discussion prior to any unfortunate discovery. It'll greatly speed our recovery process if we're already aligned and already have sort of some community agreement about how we'd respond, and it'll greatly help storage providers in their business operations to know concretely what to have a more concrete. It's impossible to be certain, but have a more concrete idea about how the network would respond in such an event. This discussion is triggered by FIP36, which proposes to increase the maximum sector commitment to 5 years. This invalidates our previous somewhat implicit policy of cycling sectors every 1.5 years. And so, in my mind, a PORIP security policy and possibly an implementation of the framework of that is a prerequisite to accepting FIP36 to the network, to remove the risk that FIP36 would introduce. And so there's still some scope. There's still both discussion about what the economic policy would be and discussion about what mechanism we could potentially implement to manage processing all of the sectors that are affected. But I think it should be, it's a discussion we only started recently. I don't think it's to hold up FIP36. I don't think us discussing this is going to turn FIP36 into yes or no for V17. But I do think we need to attach it. So I want to raise that for discussion. Probably many people on this call probably not aware of it. There's a discussion in FIP discussions yet, but there's not a lot of detail because it's still new.
Thanks, Alex. Lots of points. I think Raul, raise your hand first. You want to jump in?
Yeah, so hey everybody. I just wanted to talk about the new API for built-in actors. This is, in my opinion, it's going to be a large endeavor, and it's actually a critical piece that needs to be absolutely available as soon as the FVM, as soon as programmability ships. Otherwise, we risk being in a place where we ship programmability, and despite having performed some of these technical underlying refactors of sort of like storage markets and so on, still developers are not able to program the things that they want to program. I think there is a ton of product input that needs to come here, and I would like to really start pushing a user-driven discussion around use cases, because like this discussion, I anticipate that it can go in a myriad directions. So I think we need to target the discussion to understand what is the signal of those use cases that people are just waiting to build as soon as programmability is out, and make sure that that the APIs that we ship first, understanding that if we adopt the proposal that is outstanding right now that has been drafted, the process of opening up the public API surface is going to be a gradual one over time. The goal would be for this initial batch to follow kind of like Pareto principles if it's possible. So, minimal exposition of APIs, 20% that would enable 80% of the high value use cases that developers are aiming to build. So this, maybe Caitlin, we can chat at another point to figure out potentially what would be the format of this like discussion that we can have, and how the Filecoin Foundation could help steward this, user-driven, like wide-ranging source of input discussion that we want to have here, so that all voices are heard and all voices are taken into account as input for the definition that will follow from then onwards. So even though this might be scheduled for NV18, I would say that we need to start acting on this as soon as possible.
Sounds good. Let's start this conversation. We can do it publicly in case others want to weigh in. the sort of the user research component of this is always really difficult. We've talked about it before, but I think it's a great idea. So, Jennifer.
I have a couple of things to mention. So first, like, thank you, Ralph, for like, the insights on public API. Given everything just said, I will be very kind of like aggressively understand like parallel work will be ongoing, but I would just say we should take in that out of the consideration, like the scope consideration for NV17, just because I feel like that user research, like product research, will take time, and I don't want to block NV17, like, upgrade like based on that. That's not, I'm saying we shouldn't be spending time on it as a core dev group right away. I'm just saying it should be out of the scope of NV17. The second thing I want to mention is like FIP36. I am looking forward to hear from like hitting on the governance process, like we're going to be perceived here. I think it's critical to know like when, yes, the last call like acceptance days, dates like the kind of like the deadline for deciding the acceptance of the FIPS for this upgrade, because that will impact our network rollout execution plan a lot. So FIP36 right now is a very heavy like governance process that we are trying to pursue here, and which is very interesting. I think crypto econ team is spending great effort like engaging with the community, which is like highly appreciated. So that's great. I agree with other plans as Alex just described. I am a huge fan of like, if we do have the bandwidth at the time, I would love to see the storage market to get like more closer to be fully enabled before NV18, just because I think that FIP is a big change and it will be super risky to introduce that FIP along with M2.1. So assuming we will be deferred that post M2.1, then it will be waiting for another upgrade, which will take a long time. So that's my thought process. Also, I know we're almost at time, so I will go quick. I also want to just like call out this projected timeline is not feasible based on my understanding on the current plan from the Lotus team and the CryptoNet Lab and also other implementation team. The end of September suggests that the code freeze will be like, the third week of August or like late August. It's not feasible. We will have to do another like deep analysis on the timeline after we confirming the FIPS. We have the scope. We provide like ETA on each FIP based on like each team's like bandwidth, so we can have a better like soft. I know this is like projected like soft launch date, highly potential. So like we will have to adjust that. I'm happy to have all those conversations in the public TPM channel or the field FIP channel once we have more information. Another thing I really want to push for is to have a plan from the FVM team. I know you're working really hard on that, Raul, with your working group, but like I want to be very aggressive, like push for like a date on like what's the ship time projection on FEM, because that will decide on how many upgrades we will be having for the rest of the year, and that will impact the scope of NV17 a lot. And whenever there's a network upgrade, Lotus team along other field infra team, we always have to allocate resources in advance. So I just want to make sure we are all planned over there. That's all.
Yeah, and Ayush, I know we're close to time, but want to make sure you have an opportunity to weigh in.
Unsurprisingly, Jennifer hit the points that I wanted to, which was mostly around the timeline. So yeah, I think that was captured.
Yeah, so from my perspective, next steps today are going to be to clarify this confirmed FIPS list. We'll update all of the tables. I know Alex has another one that has some more technical planning details on it. If we want to cross-check or incorporate them, we can do that, whatever. Based on that list, I think we should use this to confirm a harder timeline. We can do this in the NV17 thread. We can tag you if you want to take a look at it more quickly. This timeline, this is the one we had last discussed during our last core devs call, so we know it's not very good. I think there are a couple of ways that we can make space for some of the refactoring requests Alex mentioned. The API needs a lot of proposal offline so we can discuss it async. I know we're coming short on time. But again, I think we can focus on the FIPS that we know are confirmed, that we know that there is sort of impetus to include, scope just around those, and then make follow-on plans accordingly. But there's a lot of like open variables, and we can't keep considering them because we won't be able to like make progress towards this. And it's already August. Raul, do you want to have the final comment?
I was just typing up a comment here. So this is super hyper tentative. So don't take this as a date at all. We're still finalizing estimations, and much of this is dependent on resource availability and in general collaborations that we need with other teams and other planning. But we're aiming at an end of development that would be somewhere towards the end of October, and potentially beginning of November, that we would like to run an incentivized testnet as well. We would need to figure out if that can, at which moment that would tie in, and how that would tie in with the traditional testnet flow for delivering changes to mainnet, and at which, like, if it could run in parallel, or if it would be a sequential approach here. But yeah, that's basically what we're looking at right now. This is, as I said, this is as much off the record as it can be, given that I'm talking about it here, but it's still not confirmed. It's just an early estimate.
We will patiently waiting for more confirmed dates from you, like, hopefully by the end of the week in the public channel. We're almost at time, but like, I want to get a very quick sense, or like encourage all the core devs to also participate in the governance process of like FIPS 36. I know it's a super like storage provider community, like focused, like crypto econ impacts like storage provider community like mostly, but I think we as core dev, like we should also like store the such FIP that has high impact on the network along with crypto econ lab. We know this team are trying to leave a lot of like comments, like Geoffrey is trying to analyze the impact on the network and leaving comments in the FIP as well. I want to encourage like Stephen, like Forrest, and like folks from the Chansem team also to do the same, and also of course from CryptoNet Lab as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Also, the timing on this is awkward, but I realized I forgot to put together a governance update, which is those brief weekly summaries for last week. Apologies, I got married this week, so it's been very busy. I will actually do that today. So if you are not fully up to date, Jennifer's right. It would be great to have as many eyes as possible on FIP 36. It would be great to have folks review the POREP policy that Alex mentioned earlier. There's lots and lots of movement going on right now in the FIPS repo. I will put this together today as well, shared in Phil FIPS and cross-post to Phil Core Dev so everyone can access it with ease. And as always, even if it's just a 5-second review to take a look and add your comments or immediate thoughts, is very helpful. It's really what drives the FIPS process. So we are at time. I will let everyone go. Thank you so much for participating. If you have feedback, if you have discussion topics for next month's meeting, please let me know. They don't have to be FIPS. They can be really anything that is technically in tuned. And if nothing else now, then I will see you all on Thursday, September 1st.
Congrats, Caitlin. Thank you so much for all your hard work.
Oh,
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
thank you. Great timing. All right. Thanks all. See you soon.